Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.
You have got to get up pretty early to go do something. We are the Alternative Digitalk. With our mobile studios, we are redefining TV presentation just as technology is setting the pace. We are blending our approach with fresh, perspectively designed breakfast show, The Mighty Drive, informative and entertainment show, exclusive and live interviews.
We President Museveni wadde juzi namulaba apima akawunga kilo 2 tasobola kalya nini bwaba alya kilo 5 oyanema okuliisa eggwanga ne bwe limundekera.
Njagala kwebaza the Alternative Digitalk etuwadde kano ka Mighty Drive era n'abatuwuliriza bonna abali ku mikutu njagala basaba mugendo maaso n'okuwuliriza.
All given to you just a click away on your phone, tablet, laptop, and smart TVs. As we are streaming live on our social media platforms, on the road and on the go. We are the Alternative Digitalk.
The Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.
A very good evening, our viewers. We thank you for joining us this evening. It's another edition of the Hotline Show where we always tackle and look into our politics as a country and then see how much we can contribute to making Uganda a better place for all of us. My name is Abdalla Tiff once again, and I am here. If you all remember, on the 19th day of March 2019, the Alliance for National Transformation, a political party. It's actually the newest political party. Yes, it is the newest political party in Uganda was born. And today we want to dive into the ANT. We want to see for the 3 years they've been in place, what experience do they have that they can share with us? What do they have in plan for this country? Right now, where the country is struggling economically, every person is struggling, but we need to know what policy alternatives do they have. When we talk about the economy, how best can we revive our economy? What strategies do they have? And then, of course, there is a lot we can also tap into. For instance, the elections in Kenya. There is political maturity in that side, and we believe maybe there is something that we can borrow a leaf and see how we can do replica here in our country. Well, this evening I am glad I have been joined by Major General Mugisha Muntu. Some time back we were with him here before we got raided, and we am glad he is with us again tonight. General Mugisha Muntu, it's a pleasure having you here, and we will most welcome our viewers who would love to hear from you.
Thank you, Tiff, for hosting me again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Digitalk. It's my pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you.
This evening.
Well, that's Major General Mugisha Muntu. He is the founding coordinator of the Alliance for National Transformation, one of the newest political parties in Uganda. If you remember, there is a new approach they've brought into our politics. There is a lot that we can really learn from the Alliance for National Transformation. If you didn't know, it is the only political party in Uganda that if you have aspirations for presidential elections, to stand as a presidential candidate, you do not have to hold any position in the party. They believe if you have, you'll be overwhelmed by, you know, the tasks, this and that, and at one point, one area will be crippled. So that is the Alliance for National Transformation. General, we're going to move straight away.
Yeah.
It's 3 years now.
Yeah.
You've been in place. And one of the ways we have known your political approach is to do with the institutional organization.
Yeah.
And we also know that after the elections, you traversed the entire country, trying to do an audit of the elections, what happened, what didn't go well, and what else can you do better. Could you kindly share with us what has been your experience within these 3 years you've existed as a political party?
Let me, before I go into that, let me give more highlights on the very question of the leader of a party.
Yep.
And the reasons behind why we chose to have a constitution that specifies that if you are going to run for the chairpersonship of the party, because our party leader is the chairperson, once we complete the exercise of the grassroots structures and then we elect up the national level, the leader would be a chairperson. We decided that the chairperson, by the time anybody competes for that position, would need to know that there's no other elective office they're going to run for in the country. They can't run for the presidents of the country, they cannot run for MP, they can't run for mayor, they can't run for any. So anybody who would become the chairperson would know that their focus is on party building. 2, we've seen the history of political organizations in this country. The tendency has been largely most parties rotate around individuals. And many leaders get into the temptation of building the organizations around themselves.
Yep.
We don't want to go in that direction. We want to build an institution which builds its own identity, builds a firm foundation based on 2 pillars. 1, the party infrastructure, the branch networks from village, parish, sub-county, constituency, district, and national, and then also built around common beliefs, common values, so that eventually the party, as a standalone organization, becomes the power and force behind the different candidates at the different levels. So that when there's a general election, including from council level C3, up the highest level, the presidential flag bearer, that they are all propelled by the capacity that the institution would have built. That's our ultimate objective, and we are glad that we've started implementing that, because the moment I took the flag, much as we were still an interim, even now, that I relinquished the position of the national coordinator. Honorable Alaso is the one running the organization. So this practice run at least enables us to all know that the next chairperson who takes over once we start elections, that they'll come prepared psychologically, knowing that it's party building. Because we believe that institutions should really outlive us. Institutions should outlive the pioneers. The movement is going to disintegrate the moment they get out of power. And this won't be the first time. We have also seen many parties, post-independence parties in Africa. Many no longer survive, except a few experiences like Tanzania, I mean on the continent of Africa. Tanzania, CCM is still surviving. Botswana, still, and Ghana, all of them disappeared. Oh. The ones which are there now competing for power are all new. CCP, which was the post-independence party, I think the last time I heard, like 5 to 7 years ago, had only 1 member of parliament. Kano here across the highest number they have, I don't think it's more than 10 now.
General, is that going to be there for a given time frame, or that's how you want it to be?
That's how it's
because you reach a point when the party is well built.
That's how it will remain. party leaders should focus on party building, ensuring that the party infrastructure is intact, ensure that they continue pursuing a recruitment drive, ensure that the policy for member retention is serviced all the time, ensure that these candidate selection are enough, that there are trainings for all candidates at all levels, and that there is fundraising on a continuous basis to run the organization. And also to keep working on research to develop or evolve policy alternatives. And then those who want to run, of course, they would have to, the party leader would have to have a team. But when the party leader is not tied down by the desire to run for any other office, there can be no excuse. They will just have to do that work. I believe it's the correct way to go, and so far the experience we have is that we believe it will work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Basically, now when you look at the 3 years you've been within our politics here,
Yes.
as ANT,
Yes.
how has it been?
It's tough. It's tough, being in the opposition. Tough because of different challenges. One, there's a main challenge of having a dictatorship. This regime that wants to hang on to power at any cost. That's on one side. And two, they have really undermined the sense of duty amongst the political actors in this country. The political culture has been so eroded and degraded to a level where there are many people who are in politics, not because they want to advance the interests of the people, the national interest. Quite a significant number of political actors right now are in just for personal advancement. So you find that problem, which is a result of the erosion of morals, erosion of the sense of common interest, the erosion of the sense of national interest, and therefore the commercialization of politics, the state of fear that's been more or less planted and nurtured in this country. That's on one side, the regime side, and also because the fear also impacts on people who would ordinarily want to participate in national politics. Some direct by being members of parties or being candidates for parties, but also those who would want finance.
Yeah.
Because there are many people who are terrified. They don't want to touch anything called opposition. Because those who are in business, those who are in the professions, they know that if you are found out, associate with the opposition, you can easily be run out of business. They'll slap, heavy taxes on you. Those who are in the professions, you can be, stunted because you want to get government contracts. So it's a problem in that regard. Then on the other side, the population itself. Because ordinarily when you're in a situation of such challenges, ordinarily there are people who would know that, I pay taxes. If there's a regime that is trying to muzzle voices of any taxpayer, the normal reaction would be that the person paying taxes would say, no, I cannot pay taxes, and then you walk all over me. I want to see a government that is built on the basis of good governance. So the taxes I pay are well utilized by those in power so that I can advance in whatever area of endeavor I am in, where I'm able to get the money that pays the taxes that pay this person in government. Unfortunately, the reverse is the case. Here, people, honest men and women who pay their taxes, who should have the freedom and independence to do whatever they want to do as long as they're operating within the law, are the ones living under fear.
Yeah.
And the few individuals who operate in positions of authority are abusing their authority. There are many who are corrupt, and you find they're the ones who are moving around, in freedom. That's an abnormal situation. And that's eventually what has to be reversed. So that if you find people who are stealing, for example, taxpayers' money, are the ones who should be in hiding. They're the ones who should be terrified. And the citizen who is, doing honest work, is running his shop, or a woman running her market store, and they are picking taxes from her, direct and indirect taxes, is the one who should be walking proud because they are earning their money through genuine channels. So to find that this guy who is stealing the taxpayers' money is the one riding roughshod is a culture that must be terminated. It is a culture that has created a situation where things are upside down. So we must put them right side up. For the people who are, trampling on people's rights and freedoms, the ones who are stealing money left, right, and center, are the minority. The honest citizen who is earning money, either through agriculture or through trade, business, through professions, are the majority. But the ones who are living in fear. I've just told you about people being fearful to, for example, make contributions to opposition parties. Why on earth would someone who is operating a market store, or is running a salon, or is running a restaurant, or is driving an Uber, or pumping gas at a station, and they want to see a team of leaders who go in and create an environment in which they're able to prosper and expand in whatever they are doing, that such people are fearful to put their 5,000, 10,000 in an organization they believe in. And this crook who is in a public office, being paid by those taxpayers, is the one who walks around, drives around, in total disregard of what they are doing. That's something that has to be terminated.
Is there anything you can do as...
The problem is that the population, the citizens, are not yet conscious to a level where they say, no, enough is enough, this can't happen. I cannot pay my taxes and live in fear. Yep. And this guy whom I am paying for, whatever institution they are in, is the one who is walking, with impunity.
Because my biggest question here is, how are you going to deal with such a population?
We have to keep at it. Even countries that have developed, where you find that public opinion has become an institution in itself, where you find even leaders are terrified to do anything wrong. It's a process. So we have to keep building the levels of consciousness as we build institutions, so that tomorrow we don't have other leaders who get tempted to walk over people's rights and freedoms. So there are a number of things that have got to be done simultaneously. The worst thing in this kind of situation is to react in a way that the regime wants to push us to react, because all the things that they do is to create fear. So no matter when you are fighting a dictatorship, you have to keep on building consciousness, but also reaching out to people who won't bow to fear, who won't bow to manipulation, who won't bow to enticements like money, like jobs, things like that. And eventually you're able to build a critical number of leaders at different levels until they are able to reach a turning point. Turning point always comes. Because besides that, change also creates its own dynamics. Change is it's a natural thing. It's a constant. Even as we speak now, you can see the dynamics that have been developing because of the accumulated mistakes. The cumulative effect of the mistakes being done by the regime, and also the longevity, because it's the longer a dictatorship remains, the more people get tired, the more frustrated they become. So a lot of dynamics work together. Yes, and people who get frustrated, people who get disenchanted. Now the question is the capacity to organize them. And that's where normally the opposition comes in. That's where civil society sectors come in. That's where the religious institutions come in. And all other citizens in whatever walk of life to say, look, we are a country. We are so many people, like in Uganda, we are 45 million people. So we must ensure that a new culture is established, where there is a respect for a citizen, a taxpayer, whoever you are, in a government. You go compete on policy differences, but there must be respect for a vote. The one who votes, the way they vote should be the outcome of that. It's a process. The one thing is for people to become desperate, as I noticed. There are many people who are saying, this is a hopeless situation. There's nothing we can do. That's the one thing that can happen. That's what the regime wants people how it wants the people to react. That it does so many things and pushes people to a point of desperation where they despair and give up. No, people should not despair, they should not give up. They should remain hopeful and keep working to ensure that they build adequate resistance against impunity. You know.
General, well, with much as ANT is the youngest political party, we've also had other parties.
Yeah.
For instance, we have the National Unity Platform.
Yes.
Yes, it's not as new per se, but we look at it as a new party.
It's
No.
new in the sense that the leaders,
Yes.
when they formed the party, because initially they didn't want to form a party, they wanted to remain like a movement.
Yes.
But I think eventually they reached the conclusion that they needed to operate within a party,
Yeah.
setup. And
Yeah.
then they got a party from the shelf.
Yes.
So the registration of the party, of whose names they changed, was registered a significant number of
Yes.
a number of years back. I don't know how many years back, maybe 5 or 6 or 10. But in terms of leadership setup and membership, they are new.
We look, yes.
Yeah.
Now, my question here is that you've highlighted the challenges,
Yeah.
the environment under which you work, you
Yeah.
operate in as political actors,
Yes.
especially on the opposition.
Yes.
But these other groups have been able to penetrate through.
Yes.
And when one looks at, if one is listening to you,
Yes.
one can easily tell that you have good intention for this country.
Yes.
But why is it that the public is not feeling you as ANT?
Because the public is, wants quick fixes. Many of the people want to go along with a message of something happening now. And therefore, the tendency for people to follow what they believe is going to be a party that is going to take over power. I mean, it happened with us, those of us who are in FDC, which is an advantage to some extent, those that get a wave behind them. Because once you have a wave behind you, okay, you are not able to take power, but you have leaders at the members of parliament, you have RC5s, RC3s, and the rest. Then it gives you an advantage that you now have a base you can build there from. I would have no problem with that at all. But see, when we started, people believed that we were not going to be able to take power. We have no problem with that. But we have one strength, which I know for sure, that is going to lead us to victory. Our analysis of the political situation is a correct analysis. We have got a good message. And we also experienced it when we went all over the country, because people would, almost uniformly, all over the regions in the country, they would tell us, people, you have got a good message. 2, we've got leaders who have got a track record. We believe that a number of you leaders have integrity. You have what the country needs. But they would say, you don't have momentum. We don't have a problem with that. We would have desired to have momentum, but since we didn't have it, we continue building. Because the other issue is, in the opposition, we have got 2 tendencies. There are those who believe that the exercise, for example, we are on, simply can't work. And therefore, the focus is take out the dictatorship and then build the party afterward. Our view is that build the party. Continuously apply effort in going down to build the party infrastructure and to attract members that you desire to join you, people who have got common thinking around what a party stands for. Because we believe that during elections, if you have had time, enough time, build so that even when momentum comes, it comes when you are well organized. Okay, last time we didn't have enough time. Of course, we launched on 22nd of May in 2019, and then COVID set in. We had done some exercises all over the country, about 3 pilot projects in 3 different districts. And then we went into elections. our performance at the presidential level wasn't that much. We knew that the competition was between two candidates, General Museveni and Honorable Chaguranyi. Our focus again and our belief is that yes, even when you are going to take the presidency, have infrastructure on the ground that enables your candidates at LC3 councillors, LC5 councillors, LC3 chairpersons, LC5 chairpersons, mayors and MPs. We believe that the moment you have the capacity to field of candidates go through at those levels, it is that capacity that you've established on the ground that will even enable you to take the presidency. So we believe that capacity needs to come, momentum to take over the presidency should come from the candidates who are on the ground. The experience we've had so far is that 2006, 2011, 2016, even 2021, because in those 4 earlier elections, 2006, 2011, 2016, the 3 where momentum was behind Dr. Chizavezje and FDC. This election of 2021, the momentum was behind Honorable Chaguranyi and NUP. But when you look at, much as the elections are manipulated by the regime and there's massive cheating, but when you look at the presidential vote, like in during Dr. Chizavezje, there will be about 3-point-something million votes. So you'd find that the presidency would take about 40% of the vote, or times 35%. Even this last one of 2021, maybe it's above 35. But then look down, because if we had 35%, for example, for LC5 chairpersons, basically you'd be talking about 50. Yeah, about 50 to 60 LC5 chairpersons. For LC3 chairpersons, who roughly would be around 2,000, 30% of those, 35% would be about 800.
Yeah.
Now,
across the country.
Yes, across the country.
Yeah.
Now, if you have done your grassroots work and you have 800 LC3 chairpersons, and you have got about 40, 50 LC5 chairpersons as a combined opposition, there's no way any ruling party, even when it is of a character like this one is, would toss you around. Because basically you are well planted. Imagine if you have got 40 districts under your control, and you have got 800 LC3s under your control. But you see, when you get that 35% at the presidency, but then you go to LC5, for example, LC5, because these are administrative units.
Yeah.
And then you find that you don't even have 10% because 10% of LC3s would be about 200. Right now, as we speak, I don't think that the combined opposition, you put in NUP, put in FDC, put in ANT, put in PPP, put in JEMA, combined, we don't even have 150 or even 100 LC3 chairpersons.
General,
that's basically a weakness. We have kept on talking about this over and over. Okay, we have not have never reached any consensus. But one thing we're happy about, at least as NT, there's no internal contradictions on that. That's what we are focused on doing. And we just keep on trying to do that.
General, when you look at our political landscape,
yes,
it is evidently difficult for one single political group to work single-handedly and take over power. The last time you were here, I asked you that same question.
Yes.
And you said you can operate on different fronts.
Yes.
But given that same analysis you've made,
yes,
it practically confirms that not ANT alone not NUP alone, not FDC, JEMA, DP, or whatever group can work and approach the system, the current regime. How is this going to happen that ANT is building the structures down, as you tell us, and then for these other groups that you need to close the work with, they are doing something different? How are you going to bring those ideas together?
I wouldn't see any contradiction in regard to that. It depends on the strategy you want to pursue. For us, we are looking at the short, medium, long term, because we want to establish a party structured as we desire it to be structured. That's what we concentrate on. Now, parties which believe in civil disobedience, for example, one would hope that they would concentrate on where they would have impact. Because any party take power through civil disobedience would need to concentrate in towns. It doesn't have to go to the villages, because there's no way you're going to go and organize people from rural areas and you think they're going to engage in civil disobedience. It's just a pipe dream. But when you concentrate on towns, you can go, choose to build the formal infrastructure of an organization, where you got the cell, ward, and division, and build party structures. You can choose to take that route, and then believe that the moment you go in that direction, you want to take over leadership in the towns, the administrative levels of control within a city, so that you have control, and then you can swing it in the direction that you want to go. You may also choose not to have the party infrastructure, but go and organize in informal ways. But that means you have to do your plans very well and ensure that you recruit, you train leaders, one who have the inclination of engaging in civil disobedience, and ensure that you train layers of them and you organize them around the strategy of civil disobedience. There are a lot of backup actions that you'd have also to prepare for. Because once you're engaged in civil disobedience, you have to know that regimes, and uniformly, they apply the same methods. Infiltration, use of money, and repression, direct physical repression. So you have to prepare and train leaders for that. They must be psychologically prepared to go to prisons. They have to be psychologically prepared to be hurt, but not buckle. You have got to mobilize the resources to ensure that when they go to prisons, they are catered for. You have lawyers to ensure that they pursue cases, so that when they are on the forefront, anybody who gets hurt knows that they are going to be taken care of. Anybody wounded, they are going to be taken care of. Anybody in prison, there's money there for bail, for bond, for all that. Two, when you engage in actions, you must know that when a layer is knocked off, a second layer comes up. Second layer is knocked off, third layer comes up. You have put time, effort, and resources in doing that. Because the one thing is, for those who are involved in civil disobedience, for there to be a situation where people get arrested and there's no follow-up in terms of legal representation. Or they're in prisons and there are no teams that keep going to see them, giving them food, and at times giving comfort to their families. It's a 24/7 work that must be done. So there must be, if a party decides to go in that direction, they must be dedicated to ensuring that they counter all moves that the regime does. One thing that is still, I say, as a weakness in the area of trying to push for civil disobedience is to depend on leaders. That's the worst that can happen. Because the leaders are few. So the moment any one person or two are picked and the effort collapses, then you know that you have a lot of work to do. Because most times when you do adequate work, more often than not, leaders will not even go on the street.
Yeah.
Because when there are so many people, you can get, like, if you have 5,000 and you keep building that, 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000, you cannot arrest 100,000 people. You don't pick like 100 of the leaders See, when you pick 100 of the leaders and there's another 100 which comes up. But when there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, and when the 3 are picked, the whole effort collapses. You have to go back on the drawing board and replan.
General, when you were the FDC president,
Yeah.
one of the things you used to preach was to build structures.
Yeah.
And you went into an election as an FDC president.
Yes.
And the results were not so much different
Yes.
from what happened previously before you became party president of the FDC with the same approach.
Yes.
And one would say that maybe that's an approach which is very much beatable by the president of this country,
for
the sitting regime.
5 years, you know, the work we did wasn't even, you know, as focused as we could have done if we all believed in it. At least for the 5 years I was in the lead of the party, there was contention throughout. We just conducted one exercise, which literally was a one-off, in a sense. And that's why we reached somewhere, but we never even reached the villages. You know? So, if the party had dedicated, operate in such a way that those who were for civil disobedience would go and build in towns, and those who would go down and build in the villages, but there was no contention. But there was friction throughout, all the time. There's nothing that sucks energies out of an organization like internal frictions, which are endless. So there's no party which has dedicated effort and focus on any of the two strategies, in as far as I'm concerned. None has dedicated focus and resources and time, for example, in civil disobedience. None has fully dedicated effort, time, resources on building the infrastructure that we talk about. It is only like now in Alliance for National Transformation, where we are focused on going down. The only hindering factor is resources, not having adequate resources. But we don't have any argument within the party. All of us, consensus that we go down and build. Now that's an advantage which now FDC has. Because now all of them have consensus about organizing around civil disobedience. So it's only in this period that like the two parties can fully dedicate time, effort, and resources on the strategy which they believe in. And to me, that has always been the advice I give to the FDC. I normally see the argument out there that our exit weakened FDC. In as far as I'm concerned, our exit gave FDC an opportunity of a lifetime. You don't know what it means to find that a party has consensus around the direction they want to go.
General, you know? Back to the ANT, how much have you been able to do in that line for the 3 years you've been in existence?
We've conducted, like just now, last week, we spent 10 days in West Nile. We only managed to tour Terego, because Terego is under our administrative control. The RC5 Terego is Alliance for National Transformation. Okay. And we have got also, I think, close to 9 councillors, and also independents that we operate with. So in Terego, for example, we have infrastructure right from the district constituency
up to the village level.
Down to the village level. So into Arua, Central Arua, the city, we also have infrastructure there, much as we don't have elected leaders. But we are down to the, to the cell. And there are only 2 constituencies there in Arua where we are not yet that fully established. This is the same exercise that we had done before elections in 3 districts, where we went down to the sub-county. Morning, afternoon, visiting 2 sub-counties on a daily basis. This is the exercise that we believe the moment we are equipped with resources that we'll be able to do over a sustained period of time. So by the time you finish 3 years, you are literally in every sub-county, every parish, and then the parishes do the villages. So right now, the only hindering factor still is the resources. So we keep working on that.
General, one biggest mistake opposition politicians here have made is to underestimate Mr. Museveni. You've never had that honest discourse, and you all agree that this gentleman we are trying to, to put out of power is strong enough. And then you come up with really accepted winning strategies from all actors.
My own analysis, and I've voiced this many times, people may not appreciate that viewpoint, but I'm convinced about it. General Museveni has not lasted this long in power because of his strength. I think largely he has lasted this long in power because of, one, the low levels of political consciousness of the population, but also organizational weaknesses as opposition. Yeah. Otherwise, for the longest time, the situation has always been ripe for us to be able to organize. But many times we end up spending more time quarreling than organizing. And the moment you get sucked into quarrels, it sucks energies out of you.
Yeah.
And then you lose focus. Then you lose time.
Just last week, we saw the National Unity Platform, GEM, and the FDC seeming to have agreed that only elections cannot oust the regime. And before the 2021 elections,
yes,
the NUP principal at one point said, there is democracy that works in this country. Actually, he was responding, saying that someone cannot stand as a president for 4 times and you lose, and then you said there is no democracy. But I was excited when I saw them together, and they seemingly agreeing that only elections cannot. Surprisingly, ANT, we have not been able to see you closely working with other political groupings. I do not know whether you do not have political allies within Uganda, or you want to move and, single-handedly as ANT.
It's a question of focus and also where you are at. Because a party like FDC has been in existence for, I think, 15 years.
Yeah, from 2004.
Thereabouts. So there has been time. I was part of FDC. I know that to some extent it has got infrastructure down in quite a number of areas, down to sub-county level. Parties like NUP has got an advantage that has got 57 members of parliament, so when they are focused, they can consolidate areas where they are and then work on expansion. We are about 3 years old now, and our main focus is to ensure that our attention does not get diverted from the main objectives. Build the party infrastructure, but also keep doing things in a way where we position ourselves in the public mind, because we also want to be seen as a credible alternative political force. One, a force which is value-driven, so that we attract the kind of leaders and members that we desire to recruit. Because we have a dual purpose. One, strengthening ourselves so that working with others, we can hasten the exit of the regime, but also how to manage power thereafter. We twin those two things. And to us, it is so, so critical. Because we recognize that for 60 years, we've been, rotating in a vicious cycle. Every group that comes in literally says the most appealing things that any politician can say, or any organization can say they represent. But we've also noticed that there's no group which has withstood the temptations of power. There's no group which has gone into power, and by the time they leave, they have continued walking or started and continued walking the talk, what they talk about. Every group that comes in, within a very short time, there's a contradiction between what they say and what they do. We don't want to fall in that category. We definitely don't want to. So we have spent time doing all those things which are necessary. The two foundations, the organization infrastructure in terms of branch networks, and the kind of leaders, the kind of members that we attract. That's so critical to us. But I know there are people in this country who say, don't worry about that. That will come after. Let's first remove the regime and then everything. We are not going to fall into that trap. Because some of us have been in power. We know the temptations of power. We know what it means when any group gets into power, when it is not well organized, when it is not psychologically prepared.
Well, thank you so much, General.
Yes.
And for our viewers, we thank you for being part of the discussion. Those from wherever you're watching us from. In the second hour, I will be reading through some of your comments. And remember, we are having Major General Mugisha Muntu in the studios here at the Alternative Digitalk. Well, General, yearly elections are gearing up. They're nearing up. Are you prepared for them?
Oh, wait, what do you mean, which elections?
Yala, East African Legislative Assembly elections.
You see, Yala, only members, only parties which are in parliament.
Yeah, but you can present them as independents. They can, at least to have a voice there.
One, the dynamics as they are, as we notice, because the movement has already selected, I think, 6, and the ordinary would be an independent, and they seem to be now working with 2 opposition parties, UPC and DP in their alliance. If it was a regime that thinks broadly and really wants a representation of national interest, and they were fair in the methods in which they operate, then ordinarily it would be NUP. If there were 2 positions for opposition, it would be NUP and FDC, because they're the largest opposition parties.
Yeah.
To me, I believe in that. I believe in order, you know, and doing things fairly. But the manner in which this regime operates, I don't know whether they really care about doing things in a fair way. So, in that regard, we have not discussed this as a party. This is just my personal thoughts. I wouldn't think that we should get sucked into that merely.
Okay, well, General, when you look at the previous elections results of 2021, ANT got 0.65%.
Yes.
In the general elections.
Which, come again?
ANT scored 0.65.
Yes. At the presidential.
At the presidential level.
Yes.
That is 67,574 votes.
Yes.
Now, there are proposals coming up from different political players.
Yes.
To change the voting system.
Yes.
In this country. There is the NRM losers, there is and I'm forgetting how they call themselves, that association, who front the idea of taking us back to the parliamentary system, where parliament elects the president.
Yes.
And then GMA has proportional representation.
Yes.
And for them, they believe that, for instance, if ANT participated in an election,
yes,
and you scored 0.65%,
yes,
that would be your representation at national
parliamentary level.
Yes.
Yes.
What would be your alternative to this?
In that case, it means that the party which gets because 1% of 529, that means you get about 5 or 6 members of parliament.
Yes.
Well, let me first talk about proportional representation. It has its advantages, also has its disadvantages. The advantage is that there is a sense of fairness.
Yeah.
Because in that regard, for example, automatically the parties, like the ones which have get like 1% or 2%, if it is first past the post, which is the current
we are using now, yes.
Yeah, which we are using, you can't have a member of parliament.
Yes.
But if you have 2%, for example, you end up having like 10 members of parliament. That's in a sense fair. It is also an advantage. The disadvantage I notice is the political culture in this part of the world, because proportional representation, I think this is a personal view from analysis, from observing what happens in countries that have got that. Where I have countries that have got proportional representation, the political dynamics create instability, because you never get majorities. One party having a majority and running the country. So you have to build coalitions, and many coalitions tend to be very unstable. Italy, for the last 50 years, or the last 60 years, if you trace, you'll find that they have got more than 40 plus governments that have operated in the 60 years. Because coalitions are formed and they collapse in a very short period of time. Another country which has got
that system, South Africa.
System of proportional representation, like Israel.
Yeah.
You can imagine in the last 4 years, they've had about 3 elections. Even now, the one which had gone in under Bennett of recent collapsed. Now, in countries where you don't have stable institutions, the national security apparatus, the army, police, intelligence services, and civil service, you can even get state collapse. Not in our countries. We'll find that politicians are trying to form a coalition, it goes 6 months, 1 year. The army would have taken over in most African countries. We have not yet established that sense and of stability and a mature political culture. This is my own personal view.
So
the other one,
okay,
of eventually there can once the culture is developed and institutions are strong, then a system of that nature can be established. Where we are at now, you know, I think the very foundations of the stability of a country would be stretched to a point where you can have violence. That's what I would think.
So you think for now we can still maintain the first past the post system?
That's what I would think. At some point there can be a mixture of the two. Because you can have a mixture of the two, you can have first past the post for constituency elections, and then, for example, have a party list for women.
Slots.
Yeah, like women candidates, 147 of them. And then you have a party list for all those who compete. So that if you have those who get like 5% of the presidential vote, can get 5% of the seats. Woman seats. And so that's a duo. So the first past the post creates the stability. And this one is the proportional representation is an additional factor. Then as you build the culture, in the political culture in a country, and there's a stable army, stable and professional and stable army, professional and stable police, professional and stable intelligence service, and the civil service, then even if you wanted to go full scale in a proportional representation, for whatever reason you'd want to go into that, you debate it, you adopt it, and you move on, but knowing that there aren't going to be far-reaching negative ramifications or consequences that you may not have anticipated.
Well,
and
thank you so much. I know
people, it appeals to many people, but I doubt whether they have really scanned to see where it works
and where it doesn't.
And where it doesn't. Now, on the issue of
parliamentary,
I've heard arguments. People saying that because the presidential election is the one which causes havoc in the country, that compares even the incumbent to commercialize politics, to bring in the army, bring in the police. Let's make it parliamentary, and therefore it will bring stability in the electoral process. But people forget so fast. Because the regime we fought against and ousted was a parliamentary system.
Yes.
UPC in 62 was a parliamentary system. 80, it was a parliamentary system. They staged roadblocks at Karuma when UPC was competing with the DP. And they completely neutralized all attempts for DP to nominate any of the candidates in the north. 17 MPs went through unopposed from the north for UPC. That was a parliamentary system. It wasn't a presidential system. So how on earth can people, within such a short period of time, start using the reason of the instability of the electoral system being a consequence of a presidential election and not being able to just check?
Well, thank you so much, Major General Mugisha Muntu. We will be taking a very short break, and when we return, we will be looking at what alternative policies does ANT have for this country. We'll look at the education sector, look at our economy right now, and then we'll also chip in briefly in what's happening in Kenya, just to see if there is anything we can learn from there and how they do their politics. Well, we are taking a break, and when we return, the Hotline Show will continue.
The Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.
You have got to get up pretty early to go do something. We are the Alternative Digitalk. With our mobile studios, we are redefining TV presentation just as technology is setting the pace. We are blending our approach with fresh, perspectively designed breakfast show, The Mighty Drive, informative and entertainment show, exclusive and live interviews.
President Museveni wadde juzi namulaba apima akawunga kilo 2 tasobola kalya nini bwaba alya kilo 5 oyannema okuliisa eggwanga ne bwe limundekera.
Njagala kwebaza the Alternative Digitalk etuwadde kano ka Mighty Drive era n'abatuwuliriza bonna abali ku mikutu njagala basaba mugende mu maaso n'okuwuliriza.
All given to you just a click away on your phone, tablet, laptop and smart TVs as we are streaming live on our social media platforms, on the road and on the go. We are the Alternative Digitalk.
The Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.
Welcome back from that short break, and now it's the Hotline Show again, continuing. Well, I want to thank our viewers who are part of the show. I should be able to read some of your comments, and those who are, part of the show, and maybe later on I'll be reading through some of your comments, and I'll also be opening up our studio line so that you can call in and we get to listen and hear from one another. Mr. Daniel Byayesu, we thank you for being part of the show. And of course, Fortunate Ampire, you're facing issues of the network, but our technical team has handled that. We had earlier noted it. Well, General, we want to talk about the issue of affirmative action. We have constituencies here in Uganda that have never seen any other member of parliament. And from the from the time we had elections, general elections, say 1996, and even others, so before, those who went into, was it 1994 Constituent Assembly, and they have been represented by the same faces right from inception, right from the time we had elections as a country, during the NRM government. Now, my biggest question here is, do we still need this so-called affirmative action? Or as a country, we need to reshape and redesign what kind of affirmative action we need?
Affirmative action, I think, is still necessary. For example, for women. Because when you look at the percentage of women who compete on directly elected seats, I don't think they're even 10%.
Yeah.
So there needs to be a continuation of affirmative action so that a big number of women are encouraged and also trained. The weakness I notice is that whether they are the women's seats or workers or for youth, age itself will knock them out. There's no way you can go on the youth group and say, I'm going to hang around. Age will just propel you beyond the age bracket. I think the biggest challenge you notice is on the women's seats.
Yeah.
And maybe it's where the parties themselves, if the parties develop a culture of saying, we want to have training grounds for women leaders, and therefore when it comes to terms, bow out and go direct compete for the open seats, and therefore a new person comes in. I think that could be done within the parties themselves without necessarily having to establish a law that limits women on affirmative action. Because the other way you can stop it is having a general a law, a limitation of terms.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure that that is absolutely necessary. If it was discussed amongst parties and say, you know what, since we want women to be exposed to politics, to build confidence and experience, and then they can branch out and compete in other areas of leadership, they could agree that 2 terms would be enough within the parties themselves, because it's the parties that sponsor these candidates. Yes.
Well, thank you so much, General. Now, another issue I want to talk about is to do with our economy. You see, after the COVID-19 pandemic, things have not been able to get back to normal.
Yeah.
And even now as we speak, people are struggling to even afford a meal for the day. And when they hear what's happening, government is engaging itself in purchase, procurement of shares in collapsing companies, it's really worrying for a common Ugandan, for an average Ugandan, who is really struggling for a meal. As ANT, if you were, because you're a government in waiting, if you were in power today, how best would you revive our economy and ensure that every person, every citizen is able to feel that really the economy is thriving, forgetting what the Minister of Finance calls it, that it's...
Of course, it's unfortunate that immediately after COVID, that we more or less got into the state of the war between Russia and Ukraine, which is also having a negative impact. The escalation of fuel prices. Nevertheless, that's a situation which is confronting literally all countries. And therefore, the only way you can carry out meaningful interventions is when there's discipline within governments themselves. And I think that's what we lack here in Uganda. Because without discipline, to ensure that if resources are targeted or focused in areas where if there is meaningful intervention, it can boost the economy. Two, to ensure that if there are any areas where there have been leakages, that they are plugged. Three, that there is constant communications to the population. And the behavior of those who are in government reflects that when you are calling for tightening of belts, that even government itself has tightened its own belt at an individual level, even in terms of government expenditure, to people to know that these interventions that are being done, that there will need to be sacrifices for a while as the resources are rechanneled into areas that can be boosted for more revenue collections, and then the revenue collections also put into areas that can give support, for example, small business, people who were hit by COVID. Once you do that as a government, and it is done in a manner which is easily explainable and trusted is, I think, the most critical word, then the country can go through a crisis of this nature, a dual one after the other. But once there is a lack of credible explanation, once there is a lack of trust because they see people in government involved in channeling resources, stealing, basically, then you find that there is a gap. Whatever you say, people are not going to believe. And that's exactly what we are caught up in right now. There's no discipline, there's a lack of discipline, there's a lack of transparency, and therefore there's no trust between the led and the leaders. And I think we are in a very vulnerable situation, therefore, as a country.
Right now, as we speak, there is...
Two, the other, what would have helped the country if there had been discipline in this regime would have been reserves.
Yeah.
Food reserves and fuel reserves. Now, out of COVID, we are hit by the escalation of fuel prices. The commodity prices go up. There are no fuel reserves. There are no oil reserves. So everybody is on his own, more or less now, except those who are in government who depend on free fuel and free vehicles. But people who are managing on their own, it's tough.
Today I've been reading something, and I think there are close to over 1,000 people have died in one sub-county. No, over 100 people have, actually close to 400. They've died in one Labira Park, something like that, in Karamoja. Yes, due to hunger. And
the Karamoja hunger situation that would reach a point of 400 or thereabouts dying is criminal negligence. Because if the whole country had been hit by drought and there was famine country, then one would understand. But there's absolutely no reason why people would die in, I think there are 6 districts of Karamoja. When there's food in other parts of the region, it's a logistical thing. And financing, they'll just have to refocus resources, buy food and go and distribute it. Because people don't die within a week, they don't die within 2 weeks. That means there was maybe a month, 2 months within which this situation, developed. For people to reach a point of dying in that number, that's criminal negligence on the side of those who are in government.
Well, that's what's happening that side. And now the another biggest area we're facing here is to do with education.
Yes.
Our education has raised so many questions. One, when you compare the education system at the times of the previous regimes, UPC, even the regime of President Idi Amin, I don't know, but I want to believe it was much better than what we're having today. You look at even the graduates themselves, when you meet people, the only excitement of education stops at birthday, at graduation parties. You know, and I don't know, as ANT, how are you fully convinced that the education system we have in this country is what we deserve as Ugandans?
Absolutely not. That's one of the biggest area of weakness that this regime has caused. Because education is the foundation of the whole development process of a country. You can have natural resources, you can have whatever else you have. If you don't have good education, you are vulnerable. I mean, we have seen countries without any form of natural resources, but they develop.
Yeah.
The two examples that we normally give is the example of Japan. Japan is where it is, not because of any form of natural resources, because what they had after Second World War was fish, because it's an island, the ocean around them, and the forests. And the only crop basically that they would grow is rice. The factor that propelled or fueled Japanese economic development on a sustained basis was education. I think up to very recent, they were the 5th largest economy in the world. So education is a key factor. A smaller country like Singapore, education, and of course leadership, political leadership, the two combined will propel any country even if they don't have any single natural resource. And you can have a country that has got huge deposits of natural resources. But if they lack two things, if they have poor educational system, and poor political leadership, it doesn't matter whatever resources you have. And African countries are the biggest example of that. We have got Congo nearby. It's one of the richest countries in terms of natural resources. But because of poor governance for the longest time and low levels of education. Here, education was a key factor in preparing the Ugandan human resource. And then the Amin period came in when people diverted attention from education to getting rich quick, because there's what they call mafuta mingi. Literally, people left school and says, why we should do in school? If I can be rich within a month or a year, why should I go waste time in school? Then UNF came in, and hardly were we recovering from the 71, 79 the negative psychological effect of mafuta mingi, or economic war, then a war.
1986.
Yes, until 1986. And then we come in. One would have really hoped that there would have been focused attention to education, knowing its value. Museveni comes in with his cheap politics. You know, everything for him is political calculation. And he introduces UPE without giving it deep thought, because he established it without preparation. And I think we are going to pay a price for a number of years. One hopes that the group which comes in is going to be so disciplined and so focused to do thorough studies and see how to start re-educating the teachers and reorienting them, and then possibly re-education of a significant portion of graduates in that whole period. Because there's going to be a time when those UPE kids who go through USE and then they reach universities, who are going to lack depth in terms of understanding, in terms of critical thinking, in terms of skills. Two, the problem again that I notice is that because we have two parallel systems, you have got the unfortunate who are not able to raise money to pay for kids at UPE and USE, who go through private education. At primary, at secondary, they go to HSC, they are also now going to private universities. So you're going to find is a group of Ugandans who are well prepared in terms of training, in terms of education. And then you're going to find a number who are ill-prepared, that even when they have got certificates, either a diploma or degree, that when it comes to interviews, that they are going to find it very difficult to compete with those who have gone through the private educational channel. It's the one thing that can happen to a country. So any group that goes in would have to start working to see how to rectify that. 2 levels, rectify those who have already gone through special programs to retrain and skill. And also to ensure that they go through the educational curriculum, to see how they can redesign the educational curriculum. Also to go invest resources in teachers, retrain and motivate, and then equipping schools, equipping libraries, equipping with the laboratories, those that do sciences, equipping with computers, and then spend time 24/7 to see how to re-establish or rebuild high standards of education, knowing that it is the central factor, the most critical factor in the economic development process of a country.
General, government is coming up with a mandatory skill.
Because, you know, the good thing with education, even at an individual level, in the past we would have graduates from Makerere that would compete in any other university that go to worldwide. These kids that go through UPE, USE, many of them by the time they get to university, the moment they get out of university, it's very difficult for them to go anywhere and compete. Because the foundation is weak.
Yeah.
Foundation is weak. So you do things for political expediency, but you affect individuals, some for their lifetime. You affect the country in terms of creating weak, products out of an educational system. And therefore, it negatively impacts even on management. In the corporate world, there are many young people who leave universities, and it's very difficult for them to be employed through competitive, if they go through competitive
means
recruitment processes. Many of them who cannot be recruited in these corporate companies.
General, government is coming up with a program to skill. It's actually a mandatory program for skilling all graduates.
Yes.
That after leaving university, before they are released out for employment,
yes,
there must be that mandatory training for them to skill them and have them nurtured into the dynamics of the country. Do you think that's something that will help, or it takes us back to the foundation?
It's talk. They talk, but do they put the necessary resources and focus and the discipline necessary to go through a program for whatever period it requires for them to succeed in training that many? Most government programs, they just pronounce, and then even when they focus resources there, the leakages. And within a short period, 2 years, 3 years, you hear they have started another project now. The other one is completely forgotten.
Yeah, just like the Youth Livelihood Program.
Yeah.
It has been given so many names.
Yeah.
Capital Venture,
Yeah.
Youth Livelihood, Tandukwa, so many things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you cannot get a clear audit of...
And the culture. Because the biggest challenge I notice is that most of these programs, you have to prepare people at a psychological level. You must reshape their thinking to know that this is not a thank you.
Yeah.
Now, generally across all government programs, people who access funds, whether it is Bonabo Gagaware, whether it is the youth this or the women that, many go in believing it's a political fund.
Thank you for supporting the old man.
And I think that's the one thing that can happen. Because people, if the moment people think it's a political fund, they don't go in with a mindset of getting money, investing it into a venture, and paying back. They know this is
I think you've talking.
yeah.
That takes us back to the point of unemployment in this country, whereby...
Because if they paid back, then that money can keep on revolving.
Yeah.
And then the ones who would have invested in a small scale project, they have invested the funds, they have generated good returns, they have paid back. Now you can pump more money and keep on expanding. And the more small scale enterprises grow and expand, the more employment, the more taxes they pay, and the expansion in the economy itself. And then success leads to success. But if you give 10 and 8 don't pay back because they think it's a political fund, how can it have an impact?
General, the issue of youth unemployment in this country is another big challenge. And right now, one of the biggest things we export, it's housemaids. To, you know,
unfortunately.
Yes, to the Gulf world. Yeah. And is this, because we have a population that has gone to school,
yes,
but they cannot do anything.
Yeah.
Then we have another section, another group of people who are willing to actually do whatever comes their way, but they have no access to it. And then we even have another group of people who went to school. They just want something that can kickstart them off.
Yes.
And it's nowhere to be seen. How best can we deal with this, and how are you going to run such a country with people who are in such a state?
There has to be a new group that takes power. The group that is there is incapable of turning around this situation. Actually, now we're in a situation where even those who could have had some form of discipline that were still in government, there are signals, I think they are reading signals, that we are getting the tail end of this regime. So there are many who are like on a looting spree to say, let me feather my nest before something happens. Now, when people are in that kind of state of mind, I don't see how this regime can now do anything right. Or focus resources, and they are used for the purposes for which they are allocated. You know. So in my own estimation, people who want to serve this country have to seriously work on organizing and preparing for a post-Museveni period. Then hopefully we'll have people who are sane, who are sober, who are organized, who are disciplined and focused. And then they can start working on turning around the situation. Best case scenario. Worst case scenario, if any group goes in and it just is not well organized, not focused, not disciplined, the same political culture would continue. And therefore, it will just simply mean that there's still more price to pay for a period of time.
General, a few months back,
Yeah.
I had an interaction with some colleagues in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
And they used to speak against their president then, Robert Mugabe.
Yes.
And they were like, maybe we need a new leader to, to be ushered in.
Yes.
And fortunately, they were able to witness that.
Yes.
Mnangagwa came in.
Yeah, and they jubilated.
And they jubilated. But their jubilation was short.
Yes.
After a short while, and everyone's like, maybe Mugabe was much better. How sure are we that if such happens, and we have reached a point when General Mugisha Muntu is the president of this country, shall we not have another moment of saying we wish Mr. Museveni was here?
It doesn't matter who gets in. If they are not well organized, if they are not disciplined, same thing can happen. Yeah.
Well, I want to open the studio lines to our audience, our viewers. We need to hear from you. You can call us on 0789 017 145 and 0759 132 310. I also need to go through some comments on Facebook for our people from wherever you're watching from. We want to thank you for being part of tonight's discussion. Brooke Williams, you're saying Ukwendinho. I like General. Only I disagree with him because I don't believe political parties can operate well in dictatorship regime. Well, then as an individual who has closely worked with the NRM and the president himself, I think this one was trying to react on what you said. Then what does the general talk about the DP-NRM cooperation agreement? Okay. And what does it mean for the opposition? Do you think it's an approach that the people should give the benefit of doubt, or is it our usual leadership crisis and the politics of individualism as opposed to the collective?
I made a comment in regard to the DP-NRM cooperation, which I would have to repeat. I have a feeling that Honorable Norbert Mao and DP choosing the path they have chosen to walk, one, I believe that they must have done a proper analysis of what they are going into. One thing I believe is they have to be very, very careful in the manner in which they walk the road they have chosen to walk. Because one, it's quite slippery.
Yeah.
There are a lot of uncertainties. And there are also a lot of challenges on the way, many unknowns. The only way they would succeed in achieving their intentions, if they went in believing that they can change the situation and turn it around into a positive direction, is if they went in trusting that General Museveni would listen to them, would listen to their advice. If he doesn't, if they misread him and trusted him and he doesn't change, they are cooked politically.
Okay, I won't comment much on that. Well, Unfortunate Ampere, thank you for watching. You're saying you're thanking us for hosting your president. Then Rutahwaire Anthony, watching from Isinjiro district. As an ANT coordinator Isinjiro district, we really appreciate the effort you are putting in as one national leader of ANT. We continue to work towards a Uganda that considers people first. Then this one says he disagrees, Brooke Williams, Chikomeko. He said he doesn't agree with you that political formations can thrive in such a situation under dictatorship. He said under dictatorship. Do you have a different view?
You can change form, but you must keep organizing. I would like to refer to him to the Islamic Brotherhood in Egypt.
Yeah.
If there is any political force that has ever been suppressed to the most extreme, it is the Islamic Brotherhood that was operating in Egypt. For not 1 year, not 5 years, I think for almost 30 plus years. But they changed shape. They just changed from operating in the open as a political party because there's no way they would allow them to do that. But then they started organizing through different channels, through educational institutions, through health service provisions, and built networks, but as a political organization. And when the insurrection happened, or the civil disobedience succeeded, I don't remember what they called it, the something spring. In Egypt, the Tahrir Square, and Mubarak was overthrown, and the army took over and organized for elections. I think it was within 6 months. They competed, and the Islamic Brotherhood emerged, and they registered themselves as a party, and they won that election. All those youth who had been at the forefront of the civil disobedience, they weren't organized. And Morsi won. But of course the dynamics in Egypt were, there were so many complex things, domestic as well as foreign interests, intermingled. And again, the group that had ousted Mubarak went back on the streets. And that's how RCC eventually came in and became the president. So if you are not well organized, whether structurally and formally or informally organized, whichever form you choose, you must be well organized. If you are not well organized, power can even get into your hands and you just lose it in a very short period of time. So you can't have shortcuts in as far as I'm concerned. Because again, there are two things. Ousting the regime is one thing. Managing power thereafter is a totally different thing. That's what we desire. We want to see a country that is taken back to a path of sanity, a path of good governance. That can't happen by accident. Whoever is involved in bringing the country from where it is now, a mess that we're in, putting it right on track, they have to be well organized.
I think
whatever shape they are, they must get organized. I don't agree. What's his name?
Brooke Williams.
Brooke Williams. If you think anything good can happen by accident, I really have my doubts. I don't know of anything that is good and that would be done on a sustained, in a sustainable way, that will happen by accident. I don't know of any. I hear people all the time, those sentiments, I hear them all the time. People will say, just knock out this guy and everything will be okay.
I think Brooke Williams' concern is that...
Success comes when opportunity meets with preparation. Preparation means organization. You can't engage only in agitating for a situation to change, and many times it happens. Many times it changes.
But what will you do with the change?
Yeah, that's why many people, new groups go in and they get sucked into the old culture, and they just become the same in the manner in which they operate. I mean, I've seen so many countries for the last 60 years in Africa, one group after another, but they maintain the same direction.
I think Brooke Williams' concern is that the political environment cannot enable you to do what you're talking about.
There's nothing under the planet, however repressive a regime is, that would completely stamp out people who want to organize. None. Even the most repressive of, how do people fight and win wars under repressive regimes? Otherwise, there would be no change. Basically, it would still be in Stone Age or under medieval times. But how has society progressed? How have our countries progressed? Even amidst the most extreme, people still organize. I mean, we're fighting here in 13 kilometers from Kampala. I joined the first camp in Matuga. If we could operate then under, it was, okay, one can say the question of use of weapons and all that, Fighting, yes, but if we could organize and survive. What about now? It's weakness.
What's delaying the desired change in this country?
The weakness within the mentality of our population, weakness at our own level as political actors, even those who are in the opposition.
And what are you going to do about that?
We keep working, keep operating, trying to raise consciousness, and trying to get people who believe that there's nothing which is impossible. People who succeed in whatever area of endeavor succeed not because of the environment. They succeed because of their belief that they can operate in any environment and change it.
That sounds like another struggle on its own.
Yeah. We're in this mess, basically not in Uganda, a significant number of African countries. But I don't know whether it's the nature of our educational system. I don't know exactly where it stems from. People just don't, I can't easily understand it.
Well, our studio lines are open, 0789 017 145, and then those using Airtel, you can call us on 0759 132 310, and then keep your messages coming through on our Facebook page. We'll be able to read through some. Roger Sturiahawe, thank you for watching. And then, I think I should read this. Well, you're ready for the show, and okay, I'll keep reading the messages. Now, General, Kenya is going into an election, and Kenya seems to have gone a step ahead of us in the politics and the way they play their politics. Yes, they have those, there is a time you reach and you're like, I cannot work with this man anymore. But they have fulfilled what is said in politics, there is no permanent enemy. One is your enemy politically today, and this following day is a darling, and who was a darling today, the other day turns against you, and that's how their politics is. And then the other difference is that much as they have political groupings, their political groupings are so much built on tribal, tribal lines.
That's quite an unfortunate thing.
Yes, and one time I had a discussion with some gentleman. I was like, no, these political groupings is basically to create a social identity. That we are in NT because we believe in this, and that is enough to bring us together. It's like if we can do tribal alliances, if it is the only way to go and and change power, let the Basoga work with the Baganda, and and then we see how we change government.
I hear that a lot. The people would want us to go the Kenya way.
Yes.
Most people don't know that you can have changes of government by having alliances at the level of the political elite. And then when you go down in the different parts of the country, you find that the peasants are just getting a raw deal, regardless of who is in power. I think that's why we get a problem. You can go in quite a number of parts in Kenya, and you'll find that...
General, have a caller.
Hello?
Someone on the line, hello?
Yes, good evening, hotline.
Good evening, how are you? Your name and where you're calling from?
This is James from Wildora.
James from where?
Yes, my question to Geno. First of all, I have to appreciate Geno for his resilience and persistence. At least we believe that Uganda needs more of Mugisha Muntus. But my question is, why is it so that it's becoming so hard for Uganda to appreciate alliances, yet Ugandans are always praising Kenya for alliances? Because as we talk now, the state has teamed up with the opposition for a joint candidate. But here in Uganda, when opposition tries to have a joint or a coalition with the ruling government, it becomes so hard and problematic. What could be the problem? And what should be done for Ugandans to enjoy such alliances and cooperations for the betterment of the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So on that, you didn't tell us where you're calling from. James says, when the alliance is in Kenya and there is change in leadership, we're always excited about that. But when it comes back home, we have failed to do that.
But you see, I understand what people say. They want to see one person, one candidate. But see, what most people have not, the analysis maybe they do, is that they don't go behind the many candidates who run and look at the numbers. When we fail to create an alliance at the top, many people fail to understand that the population itself goes into an alliance. Look at 2006, 2011, 2016. Even in those times when many candidates ran in the opposition, the population would back Dr. Kizza Besigye because they believed he's the one who would be having the upper hand in the opposition. That's an alliance, only that it is not at the top. Because if you combine the votes which were got by all other candidates, I don't think they would even go to 300,000. 2021, we were 11. And if you added our votes, like the first 3 or 4, 5, actually, or even all the 10, if you add them, I don't think we would reach about 300,000. So the alliance now of the population was around Honorable Bobby Wine. The weakness, I don't think, is at the top.
I have another call online. So.
If the same voting pattern at the presidential level was translated.
Just a second, I think we have another call on the line, and sorry for the interruption. Yes, someone on the line, hello?
Yes, good evening to you, Tiff and General Muntu.
Good evening, your name and where you're calling from?
I am called Moses from here in Bara, and I have 2 questions to ask General Muntu. First is that, General Muntu, do you have at some time and you get time and regret why you joined the Bush War? Then secondly is, when you were the army commander, is there any moment when you had disagreement with General Museveni? And did he take it in good faith if there were any disagreement?
Thank you so much, Moses, from Mbarara.
Let me first complete the last question.
Yeah, sure. I've noted them here.
If the votes in percentage terms that Dr. Kizza Besigye used to get, and the votes 2021 that Honorable Kyagulanyi got, were translated to the lower structures. LC5, Parliament, LC5, LC3s. It would have created capability for the opposition, and it would have given us the strength to prepare a candidate, even at the presidential level.
I have another colleague
That's
on
one.
the line. So.
The other one, I've never had any regrets of going to the bush, because I don't look at the history of the country in the last 60 years. I don't see it as if it's truncated, that one period is just separate on its own. History is a progression. It's a continuous process. A struggle is a continuous process. So I've not had any regrets. I would have had regrets if I had diverted from the principles that took me to the bush. It's the very principles that still prepare me where I go. I can only have regrets because of what I do wrong. I cannot have regrets because of the loss of direction of a leader and a team of other colleagues that were with. That's why we reached a point when I found that they had left the principles for which we fought for, the ideas for which we fought for. I continue with the ideas. They're the ideas I'm still fighting for. So they chose to, divert and leave the path that we were walking. And for us, we continue. Okay, they remained with the form being the party organization that they have, NRM in name, but we continue with the substance. So I have no regrets.
And then he also said, when you were the army commander, Did you have some disagreements with the president?
Yeah, there are a number of areas we disagreed upon. There are a number of them I won't go into details, but by the time he appointed me minister and I turned it down, I knew that we were no longer, synchronized in our thinking and in our actions. That was signal enough. Otherwise, why on earth would I not have joined the cabinet and continued in government? We disagreed in Chankwanzi in the open. We were only 6 who told him, don't touch the constitution. I was there with General J.J. Odong. That was an open thing. It's not a secret. There were about 400 members of National Council, and they say they should change the constitution. Now we are here in a crisis. I remember the other open thing, which was not behind closed doors, was in I think '96. I was still in command. Basically, again around elections, because my view was that look, the state should not interfere in elections. Let people vote. If they vote wrong, they'll have time to correct their mistakes. But the state should not participate in elections. It was a local thing in Ntungamo. They covered it even in the press.
Someone on the line.
We go in a meeting, we agree that there should be no deployment of forces. We leave.
Well,
2 days, there is military police under General Kale and Mururi Mukasa. That's how these things are, a number.
yeah, someone on the line. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, your name and where you're calling from. Sorry?
I am called Jackie. I'm calling from Mateo University.
Yes.
Last week on Monday, we saw some of the opposition parties come together to form a joint force to fight what we call the dictatorial regime. But we didn't see any representative from ANZ. We really want to hear from him. Do they believe in a coalition among the opposition, or they believe in one-man army? And also maybe we want to hear his take on the DP-NRM operation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jackie from MOOC. General has talked about the DP-NRM cooperation. He has already talked about it. And then maybe for what happened at Hotel Africana, it wasn't actually a coalition as such. They were just reading a joint statement.
But let me give information on that. It was, I think, the press statement was issued on Monday. The parties that issued the press statement, from what we are made to understand, had 3 meetings prior to the press statement. We got information about the press statement at 11, the night of Sunday. And we communicated back and said, there's no way we can participate in a press conference before we discuss as a party and know which position to take. We operate as an organization. So there's no way we could go and, so they sent us a draft in the morning of Monday, and we promised that, okay, the subsequent meetings, we would have had enough time for the party to sit and discuss and know the way forward. So that in the following meetings, we can participate in discussing what next. We don't operate as individuals, we operate as a party. And now we have a position as a party, so any other meetings that they're going to hold, we will go there and give them our own understanding of what the situation is. We agree on the analysis of the situation, but we have to discuss and harmonize our views on the way forward. And that's why we are not represented on Monday.
Well, thank you. General, there is one issue, I didn't get your comment on that. That is the issue of Kenya elections.
Kenya elections, I really hope that they will have a smooth election. I hope that they will remain stability because it is so close. One hopes that the one who wins, the one who loses accepts defeat, and they move on. One hopes that we wouldn't see a repeat of what happened in 2007 or whatever, because it is so close. And there seems to be, there have been a lot of some episodes of where they have been slugging each other in the press, and So my hope is, the most important thing is that it is smooth and that Kenya remains stable, which means that even the side that loses accepts loss.
When you look at the way they conduct you look at the electoral process, is that something we need to...
Kenya electoral process has also had its own issues. 2007, there was a fallout. I think 2012? Again, there was a bit of a problem.
Yes.
And then the last one, which was 20, what? I think 20, maybe 2017?
Yeah, when...
It was 2017. That's when someone lost a finger or something like that. But the good thing is that in the last two, they were mature enough to meet and sort out whatever issues of disagreement. Okay, there was a rerun last time, but it didn't lead to instability. It didn't lead to instability. They went behind the scenes and they decided that Kenya needed to remain stable. But there were grievances, without doubt.
And we've seen images circulating when supporters of a certain group have,
Actually, the person whom they say it's not that he lost a finger. I think someone died and the finger was used apparently for his fingerprint to manage the computer systems and all that. That's what you read in the papers. But nevertheless, the country remained stable.
Yeah. We've seen some images of that tell that maybe there is some sort of violence taking place. We've seen ballot boxes that have been, blown out, and
where?
In Kenya.
When?
Just I think today.
Because the voting is tomorrow.
The voting is tomorrow, but there are some boxes, like some voting materials that have. There is something that is within circulating and.
When did that come through? Yesterday? Today?
I think I've seen it today, this morning.
Okay, I haven't seen that.
So, you see...
We really hope that Kenya remains stable. Because first, for the sake of Kenya, also for our own sake, because, we're landlocked. Our main trading route is Mombasa.
Yeah.
So if anything goes, haywire in Kenya, we will get, negative impact on our side as well.
Then, General, one last thing I want to talk about is Mr. Museveni and his connection to the West. There is a statement that has not been so good for you in the opposition.
Yes.
That the US government is still very much comfortable in working with Mr. Museveni. And that was delivered by Ambassador Thomas, I'm forgetting her other name, who is visiting 3 African countries.
Yes.
Uganda and other countries. So the first trip was here in Uganda. She had a meeting with the president, and she said they believe within the Great Lakes region, Mr. Museveni is still the rightful man for, to closely work with the US government. And many people have always thought that, you remember the ship, that story of the ship is in Mombasa, and, so there are many expectations, from the population. And now when we get such information that the US government is very, very comfortable with, this sounds like bad news to you who want to...
Maybe there are those who may receive it as bad news. I really don't mind about the news myself, in the sense that, one, the United States of America invests heavily in the social services sector. They put a lot of money mostly in the area of health and other support services in areas that directly support the population, which is good in itself. But also, too, and majorly because of that, I bump into quite a number of people here in Uganda and a number of other Africans in different African countries who seem to want to hinge their hopes on external forces. I never believed that an external force can cause your own liberation as a people. I believe that the main effort has to be internal. It has to be domestic. And any external support can only be complementary. So to invest one's hope on any external group, whichever part of the world it comes from, is an error of judgment. We have to concentrate on organizing our own people, because once people are resolved to change a situation, they will change it. And when you change it, all these countries outside normally will come knocking on doors to work with the government.
Thank you so much, General. I am afraid we have to run out of here. And I want to get your very, very last remarks as we get towards the end of the show.
I'd like to thank you, Tiff, for hosting me. Thank Digitalk and for providing the channel through which we can communicate with Ugandan people. And to really ask that this is our country. We have 45 million people. We pay taxes. There is absolutely no reason why any of us should get frustrated. We must know that this regime is composed of people who are not looking at the national interest. They're just looking at advancing themselves as individuals. We must therefore keep working until we neutralize that and create a new political dispensation on the basis of which we can put the country back on track and start developing it in economic terms for the benefit of all our citizens. This is no time for people to lose hope, to despair, to be frustrated. Frustration, despair are not a solution. Most of people have gone to school, who have become, educated, and therefore one hopes that, because education literally should enable people to know that, fear is on a broad scale, like the whole country. How many people would get killed? How many people would end up in prison? Compared the population that we are, there's no country that can ever be liberated if they allow themselves to be trapped in fear. Many times, yes, I know there are many wrong things that the governments do, dictators do, but situations always change. Even now as we speak, there are many dictatorships that have fallen in the last 10, 15 years. How would they have fallen if they weren't citizens in those countries that were bold enough to fight for their rights and freedoms? They are not made of metal. All the areas where dictatorships have fallen, the human beings there are just like us. They have flesh, they have blood.
Thank you so much, General. Thank you so much, General, for creating time to always be available whenever we call on you. We are really, really honored to have that privilege to be able to at least invite you and you show up. We don't take that for granted. And then for our esteemed viewers, we really thank you. We don't take you for granted as well, because you have to load data on your phones for 2 hours to watch us here. This brings us to the end of tonight's Hotline edition. My name is Abdalla Tiff. Until next week on Monday again, have a lovely night.
Alternative Digitalk. Real issues, real talk.